Welcome to the Wellness as a Way of Life podcast, your one-stop, all-encompassing source of wellness, knowledge, wisdom, inspiration, and motivation. Here we teach you why not all wellness trends are for you, how to figure out which ones are, how to best adapt them for your personal wellness toolbox, and how ultimately to integrate your wellness practices so fully that they become to feel like brushing your teeth. A foundational part of who you are and not a check mark on your to-do list. Welcome back to Wellness is a Way of Life. I'm here on my rooftop recording some podcasts for November. I have some birds visiting their nest that they've created here just below our solar panels. And maybe you can hear in the background that some people are finishing up their festivities of the evening with some firecrackers in the distance. It's 6:24 a.m. and I really wanted to share with you, while it's still present in my mind, my experience meeting very briefly Elizabeth Gilbert, one of my longtime mentors from a distance, inspirations, idols really. I went to see her speak in Mexico City on Wednesday this week. I'd say the title of her talk was Creative Living. And she differentiated that creative living from, being creative. And how one is undertaking creative living is a selection on a micro level, day to day, between two paths. When we are creative living, we are choosing the path of curiosity over the path of fear. And she detailed out, I think an important aspect is to understand you cannot be sitting in a genuinely curious place following your curiosity if you are sitting in a place of fear. And she talks about this at length in her book, Big Magic, how she kind of talks her own fear off the ledge and also softly and gently and lovingly invites her curiosity to be more at ease and give it more confidence. So creative living is a curiosity-led life that is interesting and really not like anyone else's. And she tied this all up in a bow at the end, saying that it's really about not worrying about what you are producing. It's not the product. It's you, your life is a work of art. You are the art that you are creatively creating. And I really love that reframe, to shift out of worrying about what you are producing or even doing or creating in that sense, and more, how are you living creatively? How are you following that, your personal, unique drive of what makes you curious, what you're curious to follow, what excites you? And so the bulk of her talk was about her plan when she went on her book tour. She said it was even 10 years ago now when she went on her book tour for Big Magic. And it was a 6-month book tour, and she told the story of, I believe, 5 individuals, which I won't get into here. If you want sort of a more in-depth, please send me a message. I'm happy to talk about a few of them. But I really just recommend, if you get the opportunity to go see her speak, you do it, because it was so enjoyable. I mean, she's just so real, raw, funny, inspiring, thoughtful. She's one of my favorite human beings. So when she was going on this tour, she was thinking to herself, like, in order to be authentically telling people how to live their lives, to take this creative path and to be an authority and an expert on creative living, I need to be doing something while on this tour that is on a daily basis forcing me to take the path of curiosity over the path of fear. And so she thought a long time about what could be her quote unquote art project during this time, something that would be easy to travel with. And, she stated that she can't really write on the road because she needs a lot of privacy to do so. So in the end, she came to her, personal inner project that she didn't reveal to anyone at the time, that instead of just, shaking hands and nodding and meeting thousands of people on the road, sort of unauthentically or flippantly, she was going to force herself to ask every person that she met on the road a question. And the question was, what are you most excited about in your life right now? And the majority of the answers that she received were so beautiful and immediately connected her to these individuals on a soul level. She did say she had one bad experience, of someone who I would argue kind of shamed her into thinking that was like a very privileged question, or a question from a place of privilege. But generally speaking, people just kind of like dropped their walls and met her where she was, which is heart-centered in being curiosity-led to really get to know this person, even though they had a limited amount of time. So just skipping all of the, like, how are you, she said the two most common and boring questions that we default to are, what do you do and where are you from? And, those don't really tell you anything on a soul level about people. So it was just such an inspiring talk. And, she talked about how that question, 9 times out of 10 brought her to a place of where life meets life, like people had really personal, raw stories that they wanted to share. And when you invite them to share, you immediately connect to their humanity in a way that they might mask that to, strangers or someone who's not genuinely interested. So I invite you to think, what are you doing right now to live creatively? How can you focus more on bringing creativity in as a style of life based on choosing a path of curiosity over a path of fear, instead of focusing more on what, society as a whole teaches us to focus on as, your impact or your product or some sort of outcome, which is very ego-driven thinking. So if you're feeling like you don't even know what you're curious about, start by talking sweetly, like a small child, gently, lovingly sort of drawing your curiosity out of the closet, if you will. And similarly, when I speak about trying to tap into joy, I think going back to your childhood is a good place to start. Like, what were you really super innocently curious about as a child? And inviting some more of those threads back into your life. Maybe it was an aspect of nature. Maybe it was a certain kind of story. Maybe it was a place in the world. And I think there were several moments that I saw similarities in Liz Gilbert's talk to a lot of the things that Srimati or Julie Pyatt have taught me in terms of, carving your own spiritual path, in that, there's not a lot of randomness. You can always find these threads that, if you wish to see them as, a spiritual nudge in a direction that you might want to pursue, or pursue that curiosity, right? I think it just leads to a more grounded feeling, and, invites the magic into your life, just being more observant, noticing your environment in the present moment, but also like thinking back to times in your life where you just had this really incredible encounter, and, what's that thread that you can keep pulling on, and bring it into your life. So the last thing that she touched on that, again, I thought there was a lot of crossover in my spiritual practice and life, and what I've been inspired through Julie. She was asking for a new women's revolution, and she sort of stated, like, we've all these words that we have been using to, quote unquote, inspire women to be fierce, to be badasses, to be strong, to be all these things. And she's like, I don't know about you, but all the women in my life have always been all those things, and goes back to all of my ancestors. And the new women's revolution, Liz says, that I want to see is when women embody being relaxed, the revolution in relaxed women. And really profound in that, Julie talks a lot about being in a place of neutrality, and Liz did say, when you're in a room, for example, and the person who's most relaxed is usually the person who holds all the power. And, I would say there's still a lot that needs to be done for there to be more rooms where the woman is the most relaxed. But I do agree that it is a beautiful intention for the next revolution in the women's movement. Liz positioned that it requires three things: that you as a woman have your priorities clear, like who are the few people and few things that you're focusing on, which makes it easier for you to have boundaries, clear communication, and establishing and communicating your boundaries. And then last, mysticism, that you have a connection to some sort of voice from beyond, a guiding, a lighthouse, a personal connection with universal energy or a spiritual guide, however you define that. And grounding into those things enables you to be in the room and be the most relaxed person in the room, reading the room from a grounded place. So, that's just a few super juicy, inspiring bits that I got to hear her talk about and just reaffirm and thread into my life in a slightly different way, which of course just enforces the fabric with which I use or support myself with. And I'll just quickly tell you, it was an event. There were over 1,000 women. It was a relatively small theater in Mexico City. And there were all these other female entrepreneurs that are very famous within at least the Mexico City circles. I would say some of them more in terms of all of Latin America. And they all had really cool, inspiring things to say, such incredible energy. And then, and at the beginning, Liz was sitting in like the second or third row, and I was about the 10th row right behind her. And I had befriended this woman that I was standing in line. I'd we bought VIP tickets, but there was still a line. They basically just let the VIP line in first to select their seats. And we chose to not be in sort of the first section, which would have you like your neck cranked. But instead there was like a first section and then a hallway, and we sat at the front of the hallway. So we had a really nice view. And Maria, this doctor that I had befriended because we stood in line together, and then we sat down and we started talking about all things motherhood. And she was giving me the ins and outs and sort of she was spilling all the tea on who all these entrepreneurs were, and the relationships with who's mentor and who was whose coach, and gave me the play-by-play. And I had said to her that I have this plan. I'm trying to figure out what might be the best strategy here to deliver this thank you card that I've written to Liz, and this little gift. I had inside the card there was a hand-painted mandala and a Frida Kahlo bracelet. So two of my favorite artists here in Chiapas, Carito. She she makes pottery and paints it, and she made little tiny potted, pots for tiny succulents that were on the table at our wedding. There were 120 of them, and she just paints gorgeous stuff, and she hand paints mandalas. And then Naomi is an artist here who creates all sorts of really amazing things, jewelry. I also had her create for my wedding little bracelets for all of the grab bags, and it's kind of my favorite gift. She's the one that makes the majority of the earrings that I wear, and she makes these really cool bracelets that have like all sorts of charms knit into them. I have multiple versions, and they all have Frida Kahlo, and they're just really fun. And I thought that Liz would like it, and the color blue would speak to her. So anyway, Maria's like, Liz, that's Liz sitting up in the front seat. Oh my goodness. I think I'm like, well, do you think I should go now? Like, I feel like it's like now or never. And she's like, yeah. So when there was like clapping and, a changing of the speakers, I ran up, it was probably 10, she was 10 feet in front of me, but I just ran around, and there had, like these ropes in the section where she was sitting, and I could just barely lean over. She was the fourth seat in, and tap her on the shoulder and say, hey, Liz, I wanted to give you this thank you card and this gift, and just say I'm just so grateful for you. And I blew her a kiss, and it was all kind of awkward and really fast, and she said, thank you. And, I hope she hung on to it and read it. My intention was just to express my deep, deep gratitude, which the whole plane ride, I had the day to myself in Mexico City. Those of you who are moms will appreciate like what a luxury it is to have a 24-hour break and just go walk around beautiful parts of a city and sit in coffee shops and write in your journal. And I got my hair cut, and I just did a whole me day, and I took my time writing that thank you card to her, and really just sitting in the gratitude, specifically for the book Eat, Pray, Love. It's the reason that I set off to live here in Mexico. And when I saw that she was speaking, I actually saw it. She posted, Liz Gilbert mentioned it on her own Instagram account. I didn't know anything about this network that hosted her here in Mexico, but I just immediately thought like, oh my goodness, this is the perfect full circle moment. We as a family are about to transition to living in Canada primarily. We will always have deep roots here in Mexico, of course. And so I'm getting a little emotional even talking about it now. I just was so grateful for, having her leadership as a woman and being so authentic and inviting me as a young 30-something to follow my intuition and trust the curious path. Even back then, she wasn't calling it back then, but it was, allowing the universe to send you messages through the people that you meet, and being open to the interactions with any and all humans as being, a gift and a potential clue in the path as to where you should be. And I think I'll share more of the story of that enchanted path that brought me specifically all the way here to Tuxtla Gutierrez, Chiapas. But you'll also be able to read it in my book that's coming out sometime probably next year. Anyway, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you for listening. I hope something inspired you here. Sending you so much love. Hey there. One last thing I wanted to share with you. If you're enjoying this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you could rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. It really does help us grow the show, and this being so important to me to get this message out to more women to help them optimize their wellness and ultimately their lives. This is my mission, and I would greatly appreciate it if you could support the podcast by rating and reviewing. Thanks in advance. Have a good one.